because this Shabbat is going to be the Yutet Kislev, which is the day that the first Rebbe of Chabad was freed from prison. So I'll tell two stories about the first Rebbe of Chabad. First story is that the first Rebbe of Chabad was opposed to Napoleon. We talked about this before. The whole world, especially the Jewish world, and especially the religious, not especially, but the religious Jewish world, they favored Napoleon. Napoleon was favored intellect and freedom and equality and fraternity and what is it? Liberty and fraternity, equality. And he wanted to take all the Jews out of the ghettos and make them on an equal standing with everybody else. And he wanted to make a state of Israel. He wanted to make a Sanhedrin. So all the religious leaders, they all agreed with him, and the Alter Rebbe was fire against him. And he said that all the religious leaders, they're right, that if there will be, Napoleon will win, that it'll elevate the greatness of, one second, I can't do this, okay. Okay. What about that? No, I can't do that. Okay. So that it'll elevate the Jews physically, but spiritually it'll be a disaster for them. But the religious Jews said, what type of a disaster? We'll be free to learn Torah. Whatever. He was talking about the Jews that were not so affiliated to Judaism, that it'll be a disaster for them, for Judaism in general, because the first Rebbe of Chabad worried about all the Jews. Okay, anyway, so Napoleon was winning. And the fact is Napoleon won. He defeated Russia. And we talked about this before, but the winter set in early and they didn't have what to eat. Okay, so in the course of this whole business, so the first Rebbe of Chabad, he sent a spy to spy on Napoleon. Now, Napoleon did not suspect in any way that a religious Jew would be against him, because all the religious Jews supported him. So somehow or other, the spy, and his name was Rabbi Moshe Meislis, which is a whole story about him also, how he became a Chassid of the first Rebbe of Chabad. But nevertheless, Moshe Meislis, he was a genius and he knew a lot of languages. And somehow or other, he managed to get into Napoleon's war room, where they would make all the plans and everything like that. And he gave secrets over. He gave a lot of secrets over where the French, the places where they had the arms were stored, because in those days there was gunpowder. The one that Napoleon was, he rose to greatness. He was an officer, a colonel, whatever, in cannons. He was an expert at cannon fire. In those days, that was like missiles. That was like the most sophisticated, how to move your cannons and how to move them from one place to another, etc. He was really great at that, Napoleon. So he found out where the caches of their gunpowder and their weapons were, and he told the Russians, he gave the Russians information, and they destroyed a lot of his things. That was one of the contributing forces to Napoleon's retreat from Russia. Anyway, so he was there. He was sitting. This Moses Meislis. He was sitting in the war room, and Napoleon came in. Now I'll tell you the second story. You'll see that Napoleon was he was like a sorcerer. He was a magician. He had powers. The Alter Rebbe was very afraid of him. We'll see in a moment. So Napoleon came into the war room. Everybody stood at attention. And he went over to this Moses Meislis and he said, "You're a spy." And Napoleon said to Moses Meislis, "You're a spy." And he put his hand, Napoleon put his hand on Moshe Meislis' heart to see if it was beating. It was if he scared him. And it wasn't. It wasn't beating. His heart wasn't beating. He wasn't excited. And he said, your Majesty, or your what honor, whatever it is, General, I'm not a spy. He said, "Okay, but get out of here. I don't want to see you anymore." In other words, he sensed that he was a spy. He had supernatural powers, Napoleon. So afterwards, he went to the Alter Rebbe, told him the whole story, that he can't go back there again. And he told him the whole story. And the Alter Rebbe asked him, "How did you do it?" I mean, Napoleon, he could kill a person like nothing. They killed people, no problem. So I mean, I don't know how many people he killed. Probably like 1 million people at least in those days. With wars, he killed. Anyway, so he said, "How did you do it? How did you?" You weren't excited. So he said, "Chassidut teaches us that this mind can rule over the heart. If my heart does not get excited, cannot be swayed by something as powerful as my selfish impulses, like this wrestling between Yaakov and the angel of Esav. If Yaakov wasn't afraid, if he was able to, says, if I'm able to control my heart against my personal impulses, so for sure I can control my heart against this person, Napoleon." So it teaches us the power of what Chassidut can do. Number one. Number two, when Napoleon was conquering Russia, so he had a point that he wanted to come to the city of Lyazna. Lyazna was the city where the first Rebbe of Chabad lived. That's where he lived. The Chabad moved to Lubavitch only when the second Rebbe started to rule. But the first Rebbe of Chabad, and which that was like what 1813, something like 1813, 1814. But the first Rebbe of Chabad, he lived in Lyazna. So Napoleon made a special point. Napoleon knew that the first Rebbe of Chabad was a spiritual power that was opposing him. He knew it. He felt it. He was an evil guy, and he had special spiritual powers that he knew that the Alter Rebbe was opposing, which now I'll put in a parenthetical story. I knew somebody that was in this big, huge cult that was very, very popular in America. It eventually moved, I think, to Australia. And they were called the Orange People. They had a big power played in Oregon. There was some sort of a big guru from India that he came and he made this. Anyway, it was tremendously powerful, tremendously popular. He became one of the richest people in the world temporarily. He died. But he told his pupils, I talked to this person, and that was one of the reasons that this person, it became about tshuva, and he came to Chabad, is because he heard this big leader say, and he had like thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that were going after him. They gave him all of their money and everything. And he said, the only one person in the world that's preventing me from taking over the world, he said, is the Rebbe from Lubavitch, he said. It's the only person that he's preventing me from taking over the world. He's the one that's getting in my way, he said. And that stuck in this person's mind that after he left this cult, he came over to Chabad, or maybe that's what caused him to leave the cult. Anyways, but he gave me some tapes from this guy. All right. So back to our story. So Napoleon, when he conquered Russia, so he made it a point to go to the city of Lyazna. And when he came to Lyazna, immediately he sent soldiers to the Alter Rebbe's house where the Alter Rebbe lived. And he told them to bring back anything that they could, any possession of the Rebbe's. But amazingly, the Rebbe sensed that this was going to happen, and he fled his house shortly before Napoleon arrived. I think it was even hours before that he arrived. And he told someone to go back and see if he had left anything that was in his house. And the person came with the Alter Rebbe's slippers and said, you did. And he sent another person. I think these were the Tsar sent special soldiers to accompany and to guard the entourage of the Rebbe. They left Lyazna, I think it was like with 60, you have to look at the numbers, 60 wagons they left. And the Rebbe died on the way. The Alter Rebbe died, which that's a different story. They took a wrong turn. But nevertheless, the Rebbe died on the wrong, on the first Rebbe Chabad, he died fleeing from Napoleon. But so Napoleon, before Napoleon got there, the Alter Rebbe sent a soldier back and he told him to burn his house down, that Napoleon shouldn't get anything of his, any possession of his. any of this, because if he did, he would be able to make trouble for him, make trouble, to interfere with him. He was afraid. It says the same thing with Moses, was afraid of Paro. God had to say, Boel Paro, come to Paro. And here Yaakov is fighting with this angel of Esav. It's the same basic thing. And just one more story. The Alter Rebbe was standing one day with his son, and they saw how Napoleon was conquering and conquering and conquering. He was an amazing victor. He had strategy of war, and his soldiers were tremendously inspired and loyal to him. And his son, the Alter Rebbe's son, said to him, "What are we going to do? He's taking over everything, everything." Now, all the other religious Jews, they were basically, for Napoleon, and the Alter Rebbe was against it. So what are we going to do? We're losing. So Napoleon, the first Rebbe Chabad, said, "I have the tefillin on my head, and I can't say anything that's wrong, and I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen." And he told him exactly what the stages were going to be, where Napoleon, how he would stop, I think, at Moscow. He stopped in Moscow, and he would retreat, and he would lose. And that's exactly the way it was. In any case, the battle between the Alter Rebbe and Napoleon is now finished. That's what the Rebbe said. And France has already been transformed. There's Chassidut being taught in every place in France. There's Bali Tshuva coming from France. The world is totally ready. The battle has ended. Now the whole problem is just us receiving it. Are we ready to receive the good news or not? Are we ready to see? I remember there was in Israel, they were saying, Tafshin Nun, I think it was, that there was a drought. There was no, and the Rebbe said, this is going to be the year of miracles. And all of a sudden it came from nowhere. They were thinking about buying water from Turkey and everything. Where are we going to get water from? And the Rebbe said it's going to be a year of miracles. Suddenly there was such rain that, usually they measure according to the Kinneret River, how low, and it was tremendously low, and it overflowed the banks. What do you mean overflowed the banks? The Jews weren't prepared for such a blessing. They were supposed to build bigger walls. If they would have saved, as it was, it flooded over and flooded the whole town. So we have to be ready for the flood of waters that's going to come, of holy water. It says the world will be filled with the knowledge of God like water fills the ocean. And that's what we have to be ready for. And that's what the Rebbe began, the first Rebbe of Chabad, and that's what our Rebbe is going to conclude, that the whole entire world will say, Hashem Echad, Ushmo Echad. Have a good Shabbos. That's Kislev the Shabbos, that we should grow Yom Rosh Hashanah. You should be written and sealed for learning Chassidut and the ways of Chassidut. And we should all dance together with the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach now.
A good Yantif, a good Yantif.
Good Yom Tov.